Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace, this is RB3, and this is the podcast where we get into the deeper meaning of your favorite film directors. And as you can tell, we're in a very festive mood because it is Halloween. Happy Halloween to you guys. Yep, we're very creepy, scary human beings right now, as I have not shaved, and I'm also wearing this $5 cape. But thanks, guys, for joining us for this episode. We want to make this episode a very different episode. Obviously, we're going to be talking about some horror movies and kind of deeper meanings of the horror movies, if you want to say that, and also just some thoughts on our favorite horrors and just some thoughts on some tropes of horror movies that come up now and again. And we're going to be taking a lot of your questions that we put out on Twitter, so thanks for those questions. But before we get into that, like always, what we do is we read comments from the previous episode, and on the previous episode, RB3, we did David Fincher, and people love them David Fincher. On Schmelville, people left some comments, mainly just saying, yes, David Fincher, which we appreciate any comment, but that one's great as well. Joseph Weeks says, you guys are awesome, I love Fincher. Hey, yo, that comment, though. Yeah. But on the actual page itself on YouTube, Kai Stenberg left a comment. He says, Fincher is one of my favorites. I think his best quality is that he does not make the stereotypical dark movie, with the exception of Seven, because I'm not the biggest fan of it. Or Fight Club, The Social Network, Gone Girl, are all movies with main characters with dark mentality, which makes a psychologically dark movie instead of just a moody, music, lots of blood, dark movie. What disturbs me the most in the films is the feeling of darkness of the characters portrayed in the film. It feels really close to home and it feels human. Stuff like dude just killing people based on 7 deadly sins feels otherworldly and not tangible enough for me to think it's dark. So basically what he's saying is that Fincher does dark movies not necessarily based on just it's dark for the reason of being dark, but dark in the sense of like dark characters. And for him in Seven, it was just dark for being dark.
Yeah,
and that
I was
John Doe was like otherworldly and not tangible enough for him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that one kind of stuck out to me too. I like Seven a lot, but I think
Seven's my favorite. I told you that.
Yeah, yeah.
I love Seven.
But yeah, I mean, Kyle is not the biggest fan of Seven. Looks like. Well, see, to me, it's like he does have dark main characters, but he also does have like a dark kind of style and feel to his movies, through the camera, through the lighting, through like the rampant edit. I mean, like some of his movies, you have to turn up the brightness all the way like on your TV.
I love that though.
Just to be able. I love it too. Yeah, but I just think like his dark tendencies come outside of just the characters as well. Like, I mean, I think Fight Club is a pretty dark. Not just dark with his characters, but a pretty dark situation. Like that a man in society got pushed to the point of like, through the world that he has to find a way like to become a terrorist essentially. So I mean that is what the character, but I think it's also like how bleak of an interpretation of the world would have to be through somebody like Fincher. So.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think John Doe, I think that makes it more fascinating. The fact that there is someone so over the top psychotic that they're taking these extreme measures to make almost a performance of their psychotic acts, which is what Kevin Spacey does in that movie. So I personally like it quite a bit. Aubrey Berry says, Social Network as the first Fincher? Really, man? That's a comment towards you.
Yeah, I know. Hey, man, listen.
Because I asked you what was the first Fincher movie you saw, and you said Social Network.
Yeah.
Which is it's a recent one.
Well, I know. Well, I mean, that's just the one. I mean, like I knew of Benjamin.
You're like, hey, come on.
I knew Benjamin Button when it came out. I just didn't see Benjamin Button. But I remember that distinctly when it came out. And before that, it was just like Panic Room. So yeah, I was too young for Panic Room. So yeah, it was definitely.
I told you that in the podcast. I was like, I believe you because you're young.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's like, damn, really, man?
It's a great first intro, though.
The AZ Zombie says, great podcast. Fincher is one of my favorite directors. Seven and Fight Club are in my top 10 films of all time. And I'm looking forward to World War Z 2. Great stuff, guys. World War Z 2, man. You pumped for that movie?
Yeah, I don't think that's getting off the ground. And I don't think Fincher's actually going to put that much time into doing their blockbuster,
Yeah, it's like when they announced that, it's such a bizarre, not to mention that the first World War Z wasn't it didn't hit it for me. I don't know. I personally
I like World War Z a
did
lot
you?
actually. Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't care for it too much. It wasn't bad. It just was okay for me. But the fact that he's doing that kind of movie is bizarre enough for me. But it also kind of leads into today's conversation because we're going to be talking about horror movies. And yeah, man, horror movies is one of those things where they're seen as such this, you know, thing that people go in to see and to get scared and to get a kick out of it, but it's always been, actually. I'm not going to say it's becoming, because I was going to say with Get Out it's becoming more of a commentary on society, but it's always been a commentary on society. The genre of horror has always been used as a tool to comment on a bigger issue, whether it be the government, whether it be class issues, whether it be racial issues, whether it be issues within gender. It's always been a genre that artists and filmmakers have used to as a tool to explore deeper meanings of the world and the society we live in today. So just in general, like what kind of horror movies, or what do you think of these horror movies that have used this genre as like a platform to make a bigger message?
Well, I think like, well, I mean, you're hitting it on the nail, like in terms of like speaking on how how the genre of horror actually is a reflection or of, an expression of society. You know, going back to the history of genre of horror. You know, and American cinema has always been consumed by a lot of like westerns, gangster films, or comedies or musicals. Like that was back in the early times, early like 1920s and 30s. But then like when German expressionism started to come on the rise in Europe, with the whole style of like of Nosferatu and all of these different like, you know, crazy kind of horror films. Through that like movement of German expressionism came like two different genres, actually, noir and horror. Noir films, we start to see a shift with that, with the combination of gangster, but horror kind of branched off on its own. And the reason why is because they're so cheap and so inexpensive. Even back in the day, that's what all of like Universal was found off of, Universal Studios, because you know, back in the days there was like the big six. You know, there was only like six major studios, and Universal was not one of them, man. They were like the lower tier.
Yeah.
They were like the indie studio back in the day, just making like low rate B movies or whatever. But you know, they got that reputation through their monster movies, and those films, you know, being adapted the way they were back then, were also, you know, like you said, a sign of the times. You know, you see like Frankenstein is like a commentary on, you know, impersonalism, like the rise of technology. You know, is kind of the American version of like this is more sci-fi, but Metropolis.
Sure.
You know, but it's like the American version of that, like the horrors of technology, the horrors of life, the horrors of organisms, that we're just like the horrors of science in particular. And that's when the book was written, and that's when the film came out. Same thing with other stuff like Dracula, representing like the foreigner, like the shit, like the kind of fear of like the other that was happening a lot during the 1930s. And then, you know, moving into like the post-war era, we start to see the shift in a lot of what we saw in horror too, like a lot more subgenres like emerging. And I think that's really what horror is essentially broken off into. Like that's why it's probably the longest running consecutive genre we'll ever see, because it's based purely on the experience that people experience. So you'll always get an experience out of somebody when they go to the movies. And you know, same thing with comedy. That's why comedy's always sticking around. But also horror has so many different subgenres. We see slasher movies. We see like home invasion flicks. We see, you know, like, you know, psychological thrillers, kind of, you know, like a lot of different genres.
It's incredible how many different genres. Just like studying up on all these movies, it's crazy, man. Go ahead and finish those.
Yeah, no, exactly. So like that's, you know, and you know, you were kind of talking about now how we're starting to see a little more social commentary being more upfront, with what horror is, and I think that's always been the fountain point. But now we're starting to see it evolve into mainstream, you know, horror. You know,
Yeah,
what I
it's
mean?
crazy. That's such a good point because it's something that's always been a part of horror, but now it's becoming like the selling point of horror, or almost the thing you buy at face value. Whether it's like before it's like the subdued subtext of the movie, and now it's like the top over the top subtext of the movie where it's like you know exactly what you're paying a ticket for. A perfect example of that besides Get Out is The Purge.
Oh
Because
yeah.
The Purge is all about social commentary. It's all about class and society. The elite, the one percenters, the capitalism. It tackles all those things like on the top of the film. Like you know exactly what you're gonna watch when you see a Purge movie now.
Right, right, and you know, and going to how the social commentary kind of plays a role into it. You know, we see like a lot of like young, interesting like filmmakers back in like the old days, like in the '60s, '70s, start to play with like the social ideas of like of the American experience. You know,
Sure.
because horror has always been an expression of like the German, the European kind of like expression of like you know the post-war like Germany being you know losing World War I and rising to power again. That's always what like the older flicks kind of represented. Now the newer flicks we start to see a little more reflection of America. You know, George A. Romero coming with you know the original Night of the Living Dead. You know. Putting a cast of African American faces on a horror film that was so groundbreaking at the time that like nobody wanted to fund it, you know, and that's why it's like that movie to this day doesn't even have a license.
Do you know the year off the top of your head?
I think it's 1968,
It's just
something like
it's
that. Yeah.
remarkable how
But you know, the peak of the civil rights movement, that you know that movie that his series of movies was like coming out in 1968.
68. Yeah.
Yes. So like yeah, so you
That's
know
insane, dude.
yeah.
Like the fact that I mean, it was hard enough to do it like 10 years ago to put
Yeah.
a black guy in a movie.
Yeah.
And now he did it like so many years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and exactly, and then we see like we see a further evolution talking about like feminism and stuff of like Rosemary's Baby. Also coming out in 1969, I think, something like that. Psycho was you know an analysis of like motherhood and like you know almost another commentary on feminism as well. So like we see like and that's Hitchcock. You know we're talking about Hitchcock. You know Polanski.
I want. I kind of want
Romero.
to.
So it's so back then, but then we start to see a shift in it in like the '80s and stuff, where we start to see more traditional kind of you know stuff that you know appealing more to the mainstream.
There was a lot of slashers coming out. In the
Slashers,
80s.
yeah, exactly,
I know
exactly.
that for sure.
Like Friday the 13th, Halloween, the original Halloween, John Carpenter,
The Thing came out.
the
that
thing,
time too.
yeah, thing, yeah, like sci-fi horror.
I kind of want to jump into that just because I know you're a Hitchcock guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I just reading up on Psycho. It's crazy because Psycho, watching that movie, it's crazy how like it's such a striking image. Like it already has like a classic image to it, and the characters are already classic, and just everything he did with that is just timeless. As far as like the psychopath, the relationship between a mother and a son, as far as the sexual
Like
frustration and how that leads to obviously Psycho and how that leads to someone kind of breaking down to the point of using it's this weird mesh of anger and violence and sexuality. It's this weird mesh that kind of gets muddled and it gets in between like obviously you've seen Mindhunter, right?
right.
Mindhunter kind of deals with that where it's like it's this weird thing where like the guys who have relationships or weird bad relationships with their mother end up taking that frustration out on other females in a very aggressive violent way and sometimes in a sexual way with obviously with rape and with other things as well but it's a weird mix that is actually Psycho has some grounding in reality when you watch Mindhunter because that's based on real people
Yeah.
who had that frustration with their mother and that bad relationship. So seeing Psycho now and you're just like, damn, that's close to home in the sense of how real that is with real serial killers and real people who kill women for sport.
Yeah, I think it's like loosely based on like a true story. If not a true story, at least it's based around the character of somebody who like did like live in his like literally wear his mother's skin. I believe it's based on some like true material on that. But you know, talking about Psycho in particular, that's probably Hitchcock's most revered motion picture. It's his first he did like pretty much he paid out of pocket. No studio really wanted to pay for it, so he was like He'll just put up $1 million himself and do it. He got a television crew behind it, and he shot it like basically like on his own, and he came back and it became like the biggest hit of like 1960. And that was really, I think at that point, you know, we know Hitchcock now was like this master filmmaker who had done so much. You know, he's an auteur. You know, he's like a revered guy. But you know, back in that time, in like the 40s and 50s, he was still seen as like the company man. You know, he would go to the studio and deliver like a studio picture. Even though they were very artful and very like mind bending and twisting and very original, there were still like very much company man, you know, things. But with Psycho, that kind of was something that thrusted Hitchcock into the mainstream as being like the name to follow, you know, equivalent to today's, like maybe like David Fincher or, you know, like a Nolan of like
Sure.
today. He even had his own like TV show back then, but was,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was gonna say like with Psycho being how groundbreaking it was, how new interpretation of what horror can be, you know, setting, you know, killing off your main character halfway through your movie, kind of leaving like this open thread. It kind of starts off as a mystery within itself of her running away with the money and all that stuff, but then becoming a straight up horror, you know, thriller as you see it, and just so much iconic stuff in Psycho.
It's crazy,
So,
yeah. And back then, it must have been so freaking disturbing back then. I
Yeah.
can't imagine like just watching that, and you're just as obviously portraying violence against women, portraying it in an odd sexual manner, portraying it in just an over the top sense, and back then it must have been insane. I can
Yeah.
only imagine the feedback you might have gotten from that.
Yeah, I mean, and it was reviewed well. You know, it performed extremely well. But there was a lot of people who were just like, oh, it's just like a fad. It's just a one time.
And
Like,
3 years later, he followed it up with The Birds.
yeah,
I know
which was
that.
also a big hit.
Yeah.
Big hit with critics and fans, and but you know, again, that just comes to people are always looking for the experience, and
Sure.
Psycho was something that delivered on a big experience, a nightmarish experience, kind of externalizing the fears we're all internalizing. So
Yeah, that's always the thing with horror, right? Is like that experience that people get. It's crazy how someone who's kind of newly getting into horror on a very you know, studious or very like, you know, just based on pure knowledge of it and not necessarily personal love of it. Because I know a lot of people have a personal connection to horror, whereas I kind of don't, unless it's Alien. Everything else, as far as horror movies, don't really have a. Oh well, everything else. I'm wearing this thing, except for vampires. Vampires have a deep connection with me on a very deep level. I talked about it on the Schmoes podcast a few times, and I
Yeah.
talked about it on GT's podcast a while back. But besides that, I don't have a clear connection to horror. And seeing other people who do is incredibly fascinating. I remember watching Don't Breathe last year, and I remember coming out of the theater and kind of waiting for my friend to come out who kind of got stuck in the crowd. And seeing people's reaction to that is very interesting. It's very, they're all waiting for like, oh, what'd you feel? How did you feel when this part happened? How did you feel when that part happened? Were you disturbed? Were you offended? Were you like, you know, that whole mentality? Or every scary movie has a sort of like community feel where it's like everyone is in this together and we're all experiencing it through the main eyes of the main character, and we're all experiencing all these emotions and all these fears and all these thoughts at the same time, so we're allowed to react to it, whether it's a scare, whether it's a creepy scene or a disturbing scene or a funny scene, like whatever it is in a horror movie, we react to it in a very out loud level, I guess you can say. It's crazy because that's that fascination with horror, and that's the experience I had in Get Out too. Because I saw Get Out, I saw it the week after it came out, and I saw it by myself. It was still a sold out crowd.
yeah,
It was a huge crowd, but it's crazy because at the third act of that movie, when people when semi spoiler alert, when Daniel Kaluuya's character, was his name Chris?
Chris,
When
yeah.
Chris was on his spree of just like getting the hell out of there,
Yeah.
everyone in that theater was losing their mind, and I thought I was the only one because I'm watching it and I'm like, in my head, I'm just like, get out, dude, come on, man, just go, freaking kill that guy, kill him, and then suddenly when he started killing people,
Yeah.
And everyone else in the theater was just like, when he killed the dad and when he's killing
Yeah.
the son, and everyone just goes, yeah. And I'm just like, oh shit, they felt the same way I did. All right,
Yeah.
now kill that lady, kill that lady, kill that lady. Like, we're all going crazy for him to.
Right.
It's this communal experience of like, and then we're just like cheering for him to get to like keep running and go because he's having so many hurdles along the way, right? With the grandma, with the daughter, with everyone else. And it was that experience that was crazy because everyone was feeling this sense of anxiety that the film brought you, and the sense of passion for the main character. That's what works so well.
Right.
Having a main character who is smart, who doesn't piss you off, and who everyone can root for. That's what Chris was in that movie. So much so that Jordan Peele changed the ending of the movie.
Yeah, because he knew people wanted a happy ending.
He knew people. Yeah, they're rooting for this guy, and they want him to have to make it out in the end, and not to get caught or whatever, like which the original ending was.
And I think you touch on the ending of Get Out, which I think is one of the greatest like horror endings, especially for a horror comedy, that I think Get Out represents. The what that is, because for me, horror movies, I watch them, I don't really get scared by them, but what really scares me is like real life fear, and the thought of like, spoiler alerts for Get Out, by the way, if you haven't seen it,
which I kind of did spoil already.
yeah. But you already know if you see a black man with like blood covered all over him, strangling like a white girl, no matter what like the other family did, the police are gonna arrest this dude. Probably more than likely, like hurt him or whatever. So like watching that was when the real horror kicked into me. That's when like me, and I think like when I saw it open, like a lot of people were just like, like, oh man, like, because that really is like the scariest part. But then like being able to pay that off with a good laugh, like with the TSA stuff, is just perfect.
It was perfect, dude. It was great because I remember I've introduced Get Out to my family because they never. I told you that I think a while back, but basically I went home over summer and I brought Get Out with me because I bought it. So I introduced it to my mom, to my brother. And eventually to my dad. But I remember watching that with my mom, and every emotion that she's supposed to feel, she felt. And just that feeling of like, obviously you feel it on a different level, but just that feeling of like, you see the cops pull up, you see the sirens, I guess it's not really cops, but you see the sirens and you see his hands over the girl, and you're immediately like, oh no, like your hands go up, and that's kind of the general reaction you get because of that sense. That's a very good point. And it's funny because you mentioned also the concept of horror on a real level. Because a lot of people aren't, like you said, afraid of like the monster horror because it's fake. There's not going to be a crazy killer vampire sucking your blood, or a giant Frankenstein monster, or I don't know, whatever fake monsters, or a werewolf eating your face off. You're not necessarily afraid of that because it's not real, right? It's a fake, creation made to scare you, but it's not necessarily real. There's also something to be said about real horrors. There's The Silence of the Lambs, which is a horror movie based on, like someone who's a real human being, and he is the real dark part of this, where it's like his presence is someone who's tangible and real, and he's capable of doing something as evil as an evil werewolf eating your face off. So there's something to be said about that. What do you think of that? Like the human being the evil character and being the horror of a movie.
No, yeah, I mean, I think that goes right back to what we're talking about, like commenting on society. You know what I mean? What does this? Because oftentimes the villain will represent something. Oftentimes the human inside of us is what scares us the most. A lot of times the people who we aren't familiar with, the people who are so like mentally deranged, so have these characters like Hannibal Lecter. You kind of discuss is like somebody who is obviously eating people. He's a cannibal. We know nothing about that, and I think that's the scariest part. Like that's what us not being able to understand why somebody who's insane or psychopathic acts and their tendencies. That's what just fascinates us more. I think especially when there's somebody like a great performance like Anthony Hopkins in that movie, who really brings to life a lot of the stuff. I mean, that whole scene where he's having the interrogation with Jodie Foster and he does the Fanta Bean line and he does like the tss, like that's all improvised, like
and that's
set.
classic already.
Yeah. So like, but even from a character level, he's already a fascinating dude to begin with.
Sure.
So that just goes back to what we don't know, what we don't, and I think that's with humans aside, I think that's also a big fear in other aspects. What are we afraid of when it comes to like the sea? And that's where we get Jaws, right? Jaws was a movie that scared a lot of people.
Scared a lot of people.
Yeah.
Bro, I'm still scared.
Yeah,
I ain't never
yeah.
going back in the ocean ever again.
Right.
Sharks scared the living crap out of me after I saw Jaws when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I was a swimmer my whole life. So you have no idea the nightmares I've had with a giant shark eating your face. It still scares me. Like, it's so funny how everyone, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's so funny how everyone just always says it looks so fake, and I'm like, it does kind of look fake, but it's still scary to me, dude. It still gives me those chills. That and Chucky, like, they give me chills still to this day, just because of my childhood, because I connect that back to feeling the fear of me as a kid and not necessarily me now, right? As me now, I'm just like, whatever, but I still feel like, oh, maybe not whatever, and I suddenly become a kid again. I become a child because I relate that back to emotion as a child. It's crazy. It's crazy how that happens.
No, exactly. And yeah, that's why horror is so effective, because it's able to give everybody an experience that relates to something that they fear.
Sure.
Everybody knows what fear feels like. So being able to capitalize off of that is something that filmmakers have a really nice time playing around with. But with Jaws, it's like, it's like, we don't know what's at sea. What's the creature underneath that we don't see. And I mean, I guess now kind of Jaws is more recategorized as a thriller, but it was definitely
It's still, I still categorize it as a horror.
As a horror,
I would call it a horror. I would.
yeah. I mean, and I think that's what's funny about horror too, is like the
Defining it, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. Like, is that a horror? Is it not a horror? Like, it's really tough to define it. Yeah.
Yeah, and people have been like trying to play with it, like rearrange. Like, I know in the 50s, like Universal tried to remarket all their old horror monster movies as sci-fi movies. Actually, they put out big ads like, check out this new set of sci-fi characters, and because that's when sci-fi was really breaking out. That's when we saw like Day After Tomorrow and like all these like weird sci-fi movies. And again, reflection of the time. Like the reason why sci-fi came out is because people were just like scared of like nuclear war and scared of technology. So then horror, already reflecting that from previous generations, will fit right into what sci-fi was back in the day. But then we see now, like we're talking about Jaws, is it horror, is it thriller? Nightmare Before Christmas, is it a Christmas movie, is it a Halloween movie? We don't know.
I love that debate. It's still my favorite debate ever. Is it? It's like, who cares, dude? No, but it really does matter, because I forget who asked me that recently, and I was just like, it's Chris, it's Halloween. Damn it, I don't know. It's the question to solve all of humanity. It's like that question.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about a specific type of horror involving it on a different aspect, and we kind of mentioned it in the beginning. But I want to talk about It Follows, just because It Follows kind of deals with that. Just the fact of a sexually transmitted horror disease is such a fascinating concept. I don't know have you seen It Follows, first of all?
Yeah, I've seen it. Actually, funny enough, you bring that up. I'm in this like film and media theory class.
Cool.
And we rewatch films and like study like the theories
So you
behind it.
recently rewatched it?
Yeah, we recently watched it, like talking about feminism theory. So but yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I want to hear every thought you had about It Follows, because to me it's something that I saw. I didn't see it when it came out. I saw it when I was on Netflix, and I saw it with my buddies who are big horror fans. It's crazy how we all know like huge horror fans. Like, some of my best friends are big horror fans, and they're kind of the ones who are like, watch it, you gotta watch it, sit down and watch it. But
Right.
I saw It Follows, and It Follows is a very fascinating type of horror, because it is very freaky and it freaks you out, but also taking that concept of like you said before, of a woman, but also of sexuality. Even with Friday the 13th, that's also something that comes into play. But anyways, I want to hear your thoughts on that, on It Follows.
No, I mean, it's a good movie. It's a very like deep movie. Like it's obviously a commentary on like STDs, sexually transmitted, whatnot. Like a feminist like the feminist perspective of horror, where it is that. Or really a feminist approach to like sexuality, and like we're talking about like STDs and stuff, but even more to that effect is playing along with the genres of the trope, but subverting them to make the traditional man like role, like the man like
The masculine role,
masculine
yeah.
role, making it feminine, and making her journey as a character a reflection of like like equality, like essentially like why is she being burdened with this with this demon at the expense of another dude, so it's very deep. Like I think,
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because it's the whole concept of passing it on.
yeah,
And it's almost like releasing yourself of an actual demonic curse, right?
yeah,
And passing it on in the way of obviously sexually transmitted disease, but passing it on to, like you said, a woman.
yeah. It's like the man putting this woman in this position and her trying to fight up against it.
It's such a good point, right? Because
Yeah.
it's near the beginning of the movie, but it's the first guy. Well, not the first guy, but like one of the first people, and that gives it to her. And it's that concept of like, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this burden. I'm giving it to you. You deal with it.
Yeah.
Have fun. Like
Yeah.
that whole thing of like, I'm not going to deal with this responsibility of this demonic curse, so I'm gonna pass it on to her, to
Yeah.
someone else.
I think that's reflective of like a lot of what horror is, like the whole like virgin sacrifice that we see in a ton of horror movies. Like the whole I mean a lot of like female characters and female tropes that we see in horror movies. It basically comes down to them being submissive, them being there to serve, and like how if they're able to overcome that, if that's the arc. And sometimes the arc is just like, no, you have to like be the sacrifice. You have to do like it's a lot of weird undertones and what we see,
Sure.
and like these in these like feminist kind of flicks.
Yeah, and it's also funny because you take that from a different perspective, and you get something like the Friday the 13th, where it's like the promiscuous girl gets punished in the most brutal way possible, right? Almost as like a curse for being so promiscuous, because
Yeah.
everyone knows that if you're gonna be a proper lady, that you get respect, but if you're gonna be promiscuous, you're gonna get Jason Voorhees.
Right.
But that's kind of what it is, right? It's that concept of like taking that sexuality and making that itself the punishment, and that's your punishment,
Right.
which is so disturbing, but yet it's what makes that movie. Because a lot of people don't talk about that when it comes to that movie. They just talk
Right.
about how freaky Jason is, but Jason was made from Jason's mom, from that concept of Friday the 13th, of that Camp Crystal Lake craziness going on,
Yeah.
shenanigans going on at Camp Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
So what do you think of what they did with that, right? Because that's almost like a PSA.
Yeah. No, I mean
Don't hook up at camp.
right. I mean, again, I think it's just like, again, like reflecting a lot of like the fears that people have. I mean, like when Halloween was coming out, that was when we started to see like a new wave of, well, not Halloween, I'm sorry, like Friday the 13th. We started to see like a new wave of kind of, I guess, like feminist movements, but like also a new wave of like open sexuality, in the 80s. And, I mean, a lot of people argue about whether or not Friday the 13th is a franchise about being frustrated with, sex, or being frustrated with, being frustrated with women or women denial. And I mean, ultimately, like, I gotta be honest, I've only really seen like the first couple films in that franchise, so I don't really know what they're going for. But I mean, I think that's what I pick up from watching these movies.
Sure.
It's just like, yeah, I mean, it's like a punishment for sexuality.
Sure.
And I think, I mean, we even see that taken to a fuller extent when we were talking about movies like, like Hostel, or like all these like torture porn, like
Oh, don't get me started on
deals.
that.
Yeah, what was it, Antichrist, the one with, like Lars von Trier or whatever. That one's pretty.
I am not. I know a lot of people are, but I'm not a fan of torture porn.
Yeah.
I don't care for it, man.
Eli
I
Roth,
just-
like this.
Eli,
Eli
I'm
Roth.
sorry, Eli, but I just don't care for it, man. I really don't. Like everyone's like, oh, this hostile torture. I'm like, nah, man.
Yeah.
I'm good. I don't need to see that. I don't know
Yeah.
why. Like I get it, and I get that it's a different type of horror, and it still counts as horror, but I just don't care for it.
Yeah, that kind of came from I don't know if you heard this movie, Cannibal Holocaust, I think it's called. It's this really weird movie. It was like these people stuck on this island, and they're forced to like like kill a bunch of animals, and actually I think the director got arrested because he actually killed real animals or whatever on set. Like it's like I think it came out in the 80s or whatever. But I mean, again, like that's just one of the many like pieces of horror that just kind of broke off and became its own thing, which again, that's how something is able to stay relevant for so long. But going way back to It Follows, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, that's one of the films that we're talking about has a reflection of social commentary, social, what was happening in our times. What are we afraid of, and yeah, so it's a really cool flick when considering.
I want to lead that into a conversation. Obviously, there's a ton of horror movies, but I kind of want to lead that into a conversation that I literally mentioned to you right before we started recording, and that's the concept of the final girl. I read a cool article talking about the final girl and kind of for anyone who doesn't know, the final girl is like it's a reoccurring trope that happens in horror films where it's like the final person left alive is a girl, and they're usually tasked with overcoming against the killer or the monster, whoever it is. And why this trope exists, and why is there a final girl? Why isn't it a final guy? Why is it that she usually makes it out alive? Why do most audiences relate to female protagonists over male protagonists? Instead of having the male hero triumph against a monster, we usually have a female hero triumph against, or not triumph or fail. Is it pro? Is it anti-feminist? Is it for women? Is it against women? Is it saying that eventually the only reason why the final girl trope exists is because we're so used to seeing femininity expressed in a weaker manner, where it's like the guy is strong and he's going to take a bat and beat the crap out of the bad guy, whereas a woman's going to scream and freak out and run away. Like the two concepts taking the side of what it is to be the final person in a horror movie, right? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts because it's so deep that I'm just surprised at how deep it goes as far as like a female protagonist being the final person left alive. Is it because we relate to her for being weaker, or is it because we can see the progression of weakness going into strength?
Well, I think that comes a lot from our perception of horror, in the sense that a lot of these filmmakers who are making these horror movies are males, are dudes. So
Very
it's
good point.
like, when it's coming down to who theoretically a male screenwriter would think have more at stake at the end of a horror movie. A lot of times it's the female character, right? It's a lot of times that's the character who is mostly the centerpiece. Most of the tropes are devolved to that character, and therefore, when the consequences come down to it, it's a lot easier to put the audience in the shoes of somebody who is able to show more. And I think it's also because a lot of the stereotypes that men come with are
Sure.
like this stoic, you have to be brave, you can't be scared, you can't show fear, as opposed to women, or as opposed to a male's interpretation of women. They show fear a lot more and a lot easier and a lot more visible. They have the louder screams, they have like
Better
the
facial reactions.
yeah, exactly, better facial reactions. So building all the way up to the point of having the final girl, the female character, it's a lot easier to get those points across. And like I said, the conventions and the tropes of the genre play a hand into that as well.
It's crazy because it really is something that should be explored a little bit more. It's the concept of taking. I'm simplifying it in a very weird way, but it's almost like saying, imagine putting it in the shoes of not humans, but like dogs, for example, where it's like, what's scarier, a monster chasing after a Rottweiler or a monster chasing after an adorable little puppy, right?
Right.
It's taking the concept of almost making a woman as itty bitty, as tiny, as weak, as frail as she can be, and then having her horror of being so tiny and so weak and so frail, and us feeling that horror with her. And it's almost like I said, it's almost anti-feminist in that sense, right? Where it's like the imagination or the concept of a woman being framed in a manner where they're weaker than a guy, where they're incapable of doing what a guy can do against a Jason Voorhees or against a bigger dude, right?
Right.
It's something that's absolutely fascinating because you can argue both ways. You can say it's because of strong women, it's because of weaker women in my sense, the way I'm thinking about it.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Right.
it's the concept of strength in a woman versus feminine qualities and masculine qualities.
Right, right, right. And that even comes down to, I mean, we kind of talking about the issues of women in horror movies. It's also like the problem with minorities. Like, why is there a lot of times, why is the first guy, the black guy, first one to go?
Yeah,
Like,
it's funny because that's always been a running thing, a running
but
joke.
it's true. So that's why when something like it out comes out, a lot of people are just like on the side of that. But it again, like it's like those kind of tropes. Like why is the Asian dude always like the nerdy kind of like the third wheel and somebody else's like film or whatever. A lot of these like really like strange places for minorities come in horror movies, but then again sometimes it can reflect something greater and something like more woke, like I said with like Romero or some other filmmakers. But
Yeah, and it's always that it's odd when they do that too, because to me it's like they're trying to fulfill a quota of having enough minorities in their film as far as like a group setting where it's like
yeah,
let's say it's a group of high school kids who are being attacked by a killer or something like that.
yeah,
They have to have like the jock and the girl and then the guy and the strong guy and the weak guy and the nerdy guy and then the black guy and then
yeah,
and how they all get killed off in different ways. It's odd that that always has happened and that continues to happen. But going back to what I was talking about, The Final Girl as well, is that I think it's fun because one of my favorite films of all time, and the one that I just mentioned before as being the one kind of horror film that I relate to the most, is Alien. And we see that in a different concept with the character of Ripley. But Alien to me has always been the original, right? The 1979 Alien has always been one that I've clinged on to and connected to, evolving into the aliens and then evolving into what we have today with like Covenant and with Prometheus. Because I love both those movies. I love Prometheus quite a bit. Prometheus I adore is one of my favorite movies, but Covenant is a movie that I actually enjoyed. But having the character of Noomi Rapace's Dr. Shaw, and then recently with Covenant having David's or Daniels, the character of her character kind of coming to her own and coming to life. I don't know. It's something, especially with Ellen Ripley and with those characters of Shaw. It's crazy watching those kind of movies with my mom, right? Because especially even something with The Force Awakens, where she sees The Force Awakens. I remember my mom watching it for the first time, and her connection to Rey was right off the bat. As far as like her being having such a good head on your shoulders, right? Where it's like we're used to she's used to seeing women not having a good head on your shoulders and being dumb and being frail and needing the help of men. Like, please help me. I need help. There's a guy chasing me, or there's something going on. Whereas characters like Ripley, characters like Shaw, characters like Daniels, characters like Rey, not needing that, being like, I'm good. I don't need this. I don't need that help. I know what I'm doing. I'm smart. I have a good head on my shoulders. Where it's like, it's a new revolutionary type of female character in a dire situation where they're not being dumb, but they're being smart about the way they're going about against this dire situation, right?
right. And I think that angle of like feminist quality has been in horror movies for and some other senses too. I mean, we talk about I mentioned earlier like Rosemary's Baby. It's all about trying to that's more like it's not sci-fi. It's more like drama-ish, but it's more about like the cult mentality and trying to escape like a cult. Or we see and that was coming out also around like the Manson murders kind of cult like era, and we see that with that 1975 film, I think, Suspiria,
Oh, yeah.
which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, which is a movie all about like this girl coming into like a dance academy, but like has to face off against witches because none of the other girls could put up enough of a fight. So and dudes just can't like aren't able to understand what's happening. So like, so yeah, I mean, and going to Alien as well is like that's that's a new beginning to what we start to see in sci-fi and in horror. Kind of putting an objective. I mean, really, Scott has said that he wrote, or they intended the part to be for Mel, but they casted Sigourney Weaver in it, so it became more than just about like the feminist qualities or what she had to represent. You know, it was all about how strong that character is as a character, rather as a gender.
Sure.
And I think what's also fascinating about Alien 2, kind of real quick, is like how it's a metaphor for like birth and a metaphor for like evolution, and having a woman character as the star of that really emphasizes that as well.
Yeah, it's all about obviously the running theme in Alien since the very first one is creation. It's
Yeah.
all about creation, whether that be God, whether that be from a woman, whether that be from birth, whether that be from anything. So yeah, that's obviously something that always comes up in every Alien movie. But it really is that kind of new wave of having a female character who knows what she's doing. And she's doing things the right way in dire situations versus a female character who's freaking out and doing the dumbest things ever. And you're like, what are you doing? And you're looking at the screen being like, don't go there. Do this. Call the cops. Do that. And whether it's in old times, but now in new times with female characters who do know what they're doing. I think that's absolutely fascinating. I kind of want to jump into real quick as well. I kind of want to know your, not necessarily kind of your favorite horror movies and kind of your favorite like what's your favorite monster? What is your favorite like thing that you go to as far as like a horror movie monster or something? Because I have mine. I just
Yeah.
want to hear yours because mine's a little bit on the nose.
Right. No. I mean, we.
And then
I
from
know
there
you-
we'll go into questions.
Right. I mean, in terms of monsters, I mean, I'm always fascinated in creatures in general. Like, I'm always like really interested in seeing where.
Are you into like the creepy transformation crap, like the Thing or like the Fly or stuff like that?
Not really. I'm more into like.
Because that's the kind of stuff that disturbs the crap out of me.
Oh yeah. No, I mean that's
I'm very
freaky too.
disturbed by
That's
it.
freaky. I mean that's like too freaky for me though. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, I mean I'm into like something like Creature of the Black Lagoon, or like I said, like Frankenstein, all that kind of like oh shit. But I mean like there's also some like really fun like new way. I mean I'm also like really into like horror comedy too. So like
Got
Evil
it.
Dead is one of my favorites.
Evil Dead.
Shaun
Yeah.
of the Dead we just talked about.
Shaun of the Dead because we just saw it too as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, absolutely, man. Horror comedies is such an interesting thing because
Yeah.
Evil Dead, man. I love Sam Raimi.
Oh, yeah.
and I love Evil Dead, and I love the way he frames comedy. Frames in a literal sense as far as framing, and
Yeah.
framing in the sense of like how every shot and everything is so over the top
yeah.
and so dramatic and so funny, and he takes that same thing,
Yeah.
subdues it a little bit, adds sprinkles in a little bit of superhero dust, and does
Yeah,
that
this is
again in Spider-Man and
Spider-Man,
Spider-Man 2. Rewatch Spider-Man 2. That movie is hysterical.
Yeah.
It's so fun. It's so funny. I love that movie so much, but he uses those same kind of like dramatic zooms, undercut zooms,
Yeah.
or face whip camera shot or stuff like
Yeah.
that, where it's like, yeah, man, those movies are fun. The Evil Dead movies for sure.
And what I love about them is just like that, like on paper they're just standard horror movies. It's just like the cabin in the woods kind of setup. But like, and I think if any other director would have done it, it would have been like straight up horror. But because the way he puts the camera there, the way he frames, like you're talking about, like the actual framing, like the way the people are like lit and how it's like over exaggerated, over the top, it puts into comedy. I mean, one of my favorite scenes is in Evil Dead 2 when he's like running through the house and he just keeps crashing through doors and it's that long take.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like the more every time he does it, the funnier it gets.
Yeah. It's great.
So stuff like that. But I mean, in terms of like all time horror films, I'm definitely, like I said, like Suspiria. I'm sorry. Rosemary's Baby. Psycho's probably up there.
A lot of old ones.
Yeah, a lot of old ones.
A lot
I mean,
of ones before you were born.
yeah, but I will say like more of like the Eastern horror that started coming
Sure.
out like in the 90s and 2000s, whether that be like Ring or you know, a lot of these I can't pull off the names off the top of my
Korean
head.
and Japanese
Which-
horror.
Exactly.
Japanese people. I mean, obviously, I watch horror. My connection to horror is mainly from anime. Anime, whether it be Tokyo Ghoul, whether it be even Attack on Titan, which is my favorite friggin' of all time. Whether it be Death Parade, whether it be there's so many different types of like horror anime, whether it be Parasite. There's so many different types of horror anime that has a deeper connection with me because that's kind of what I enjoy the most. But
Right.
the Japanese are amazing at doing that.
Dude, and it's so because it's all
And same with Koreans too. So.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, those are. I mean, again, we're coming out of Korea, especially, was coming into a new wave of filmmaking because for so many years they're just buried, like in terms of like catching up with modern society. Like they barely started catching up with a lot of what we interpret now as like you know, first world tendencies, but they're really catching up to that really in like the 70s and 80s, 90s. You know,
Sure.
So like. And that time, you know, again, we're coming into like a lot of questions of fear, a lot of questions of, you know, with the original Ring being a Japanese movie, you know, being all about reaching, you know, kind of the American remake of it, you know, reaching into TVs too. But you know, again, you know, Japan's a big technology market. That's something that feared a lot of people was like this rise of companies like Sony and a lot of these Japanese technology companies overcoming like society and government. So like they're pulling a lot from like those ideas and that mythology. And same thing with Korea, like kind of like the development of like society to develop. So again, reflecting of what's happening in the real world, we see that a lot in horror movies.
Sure.
And they're so quiet and they're so subdued. It's all about the atmosphere that makes these movies scary. Which I always
Absolutely, it's
enjoy.
all about the tension and the build up and the
Yeah.
pull. It pulls you in and the deliberate pacing as well. The Japanese pacing, at least for anime, is so well done and so taken in a very creepy atmospheric way.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating. One thing I want to get to before I jump into questions is my fasciation
Right.
with vampires.
Oh, right.
I've talked about this before, but I remember whether it be freaking Blade, which I can go on and on about because I love Blade,
Right.
and I love the idea of a vampire killer who's actually a vampire himself and dealing with the fear of avoiding people and killing innocent people based on sucking people's blood and all that stuff. But my fascination with those movies, and it's not just the movies, but it's just the idea and the concept of a vampire has always been very near and dear to my heart ever since I was a kid watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, reading Blade comics, and just really keeping up with the vampire culture, the vampire mentality. There's like, and it's crazy because if you really break it down, I think the best way to break down a vampire in a very raw, realistic way is 30 Days of Night. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
That's a very raw, realistic kind of way of breaking down how scary a vampire can be, which is basically a creature who's so much more powerful than you, and the only thing they're after is sucking you dry, where you're just food. But yeah, to me, whether it be Dracula, whether it be Christopher Lee, all this, the atmosphere it creates, and the idea and the concept behind it, and even just the comedy of it with Taika Waititi's film. What We Do in the Shadows is just so funny, and it really is. If you're a vampire fan like I am, you'll enjoy the crap out of that movie. And it's something that I've always loved, and it's something that I've always been attached to and been connected to, because I just love the idea of a vampire, and then just that dark, gothic, weird, twisted world that it is. Like I remember being a kid and watching Queen of the Damned. I don't know if you remember that movie with Aaliyah.
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh my God, dude, that movie's crazy, and it's so ridiculous, but I love it. That movie, Queen of the Damned, was one that was very near to my heart. Interview with the Vampire was very dear to my heart. All those type of like vampire, atmospheric, gothic type movies.
What about like Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Bram Stoker's Dracula is
Francis
another
Ford
one.
Coppola.
That's stuff like that is where it's just like people really submerge into that genre, and I miss it because I feel like it's missing a little bit. But
You know, the director of 30 Days a Night, you know what he also directed? Twilight Eclipse, baby. Let's go. My favorite Twilight movie. I'm a Twilight fan, baby.
Can't stand those movies at all. Every time I mention vampires, people are like, "Well, what about Twilight?" Not vampires, bro. Not vampires
Hey,
to
man.
me.
You're talking to somebody who's read all the books,
Yeah.
who's seen all the movies.
And you're talking to someone who like obsess over vampires. Vampires do not glitter in the sunlight, man. That's where I draw the line. I'll take everything else. I'll take the crappy romance, but I will not take glitter in the sunlight. That's where I draw the line with my vampire films.
Yeah.
But I know you like those movies, and shout out to Kristen Stewart, who I know is listening right now.
Oh, Kristen.
What's up, girl? Let's go to some of your questions, guys. I know
Yeah.
we asked for you guys to put in some questions. There's just some comments. Gregory at G-Post just says his favorites are The Conjuring, The Blair Witch Project, Paranormal Activity, It Follows, Shaun of the Dead, Scream, and Cabin in the Woods.
Scream is one of my favorites.
Scream's
is one of my
great.
favorites.
Scream's great because it's almost like
That is horror comedy.
yeah, it's a horror comedy parody kind of type movie. We talked about It Follows, so that was an interesting one to put in there.
Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity, the found footage era.
Oh yeah, found footage.
See,
we
now
didn't really get into that.
Well,
but-
see, that's what like when I keep saying like all these old movies, and that's kind of why like I grew up in the whole era of like every movie being found footage, like all throughout like my high school and my middle school was nonstop found. So for me, I just completely checked out of horror for like 10 years.
Did you see Paranormal Activity? When
I
it came
did,
out?
yeah, I did. When they came out in theaters, yeah. Which was
I
like
remember
a really
all my
fun
friends were
experience.
gushing about. They were like, "You got to see this movie. It's like this crazy demon who," and I'm like, "Nope,
Yeah.
nope."
Yeah.
That's another thing that I'm gonna let you guys know right now is that demons. No, thank you. No. That's the one thing that gets me like really, really well. I'm just like, I don't need no demons in my life, bro. I have way too many demons as it is, man.
Yeah,
Give me some vampires, give me some zombies, but demons, no, thank you. Kevin Marquez mentions Halloween, Night of the Living Dead, The Omen, Pet Cemetery, The Shining. We didn't talk about The Shining, but we'll talk about it when we get to Kubrick quite a bit. But The Shining. Holy crap, that movie scared the crap out of me. I was talking about it because I went to Universal Halloween Horror Nights with my friends, and we were talking about each maze because each maze has a theme. And it's fun going with cinephiles and people who are fans of movies when you go to those mazes because whether it be Sinister, which, again, no thank you to Sinister. But when we went to the Shining maze, my friends and I were like, "Oh, you remember The Shining?" And they were like, "Oh, yeah, this is crazy. It's a classic. The shots in The Shining are amazing. The production design in The Shining, it's incredible." But that's a movie that scared the crap out of me. I just remember being haunted by the idea of blood everywhere in a hallway and all that stuff. Jesus, that movie was freaky as hell.
You know what people don't realize about The Shining is, and it really does come down to this, the reason why it's revealed as such a horror classic is because it follows exactly every single trait a horror movie can possibly have.
Which is great.
Exactly every trope. And you know what, the whole family locked away, the whole mother and son, like the economy, the crazy father. And that's coming at a time when slasher films were starting to pick up steam, with Halloween and with Friday the 13th and stuff coming out a little later. So it's almost every horror cliche you could fit into a movie possible. What makes it stand out is Kubrick. It's an art house film at the same
really
time.
is.
Like it's the weird shots. It on paper is every horror movie you've ever seen, but on the level
Screen.
of on screen, the execution is everything that's different. It's the long takes, it's the artsy production design. Instead of being set in like a small little cabin, it's set in like this grandiose hotel. The
Colors in that movie.
the colors, the
It's like
lighting.
it's a podcast within itself. That.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so I mean that's why it's been able to transcend horror for so long, and we're going to talk about it when we have a big Kubrick episode.
We should, yeah.
Yeah, but definitely The Shining is something that is indicative of what we've become familiar with in horror, but
Absolutely.
doing it so well and so different.
Kevin Marquez also mentions 30 Days a Night, which I already mentioned. That idea of a vampire and the idea of being stuck in a place where it's like being stuck in a jungle with a lion who's out to eat you. And you're just you're in his turf, you're in his land, and his only goal is to eat you. So you're just like, crap, what do I do? That's kind of the idea of 30 Days of Night, which is another movie that I love and I've watched a million times. Kevin Marquez has another question. He says, what's your favorite subgenre horror, and what director did the genre best? Whether that be slasher, psychological thrillers, supernatural. Favorite subgenre horror. I like psychological thrillers. Anything that makes me kind of question what's going on, anything that makes me think really hard about what's going on. I love things that attack my brain. I love being challenged in a movie, in any kind of movie, right? Not just horror, but I love the idea of someone challenging my thought process and my brain and my ideas and my self convinced ideas of what's going on in a movie versus what's actually going on. I think that's absolutely fascinating where someone can kind of twist your brain into thinking one thing the whole time and then twisting it into another way.
Yeah.
So that's probably my favorite. Do you have a favorite subgenre?
No, yeah, I mean, like I kind of alluded to before, the horror comedy to me is,
Oh yeah,
is definitely
you
my
do
top.
love horror comedy.
And Wes Craven, Wes Craven and Sam Raimi are probably the two directors to me who do horror comedy the best. With Scream and with a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are horror comedy.
Another one that I'm like, no, thank you.
But even like further on in the franchise, I mean, like Christian kind of calls them like stand-up shows, right? Like he's like doing stand-up. So I mean, they're
He always
funny.
says a goofy line right before he kills you with his.
Yeah.
Scotty the movie guy says Scream, Oculus, and the Evil Dead remake. What do you think of the Evil Dead remake?
It was cool. I mean, that was Freddie Alvarez, was it?
Was it Freddie Alvarez?
Yeah, it was a
think
new
so.
it was a new name who just did something really well. Yeah, it was Freddie Alvarez.
Yeah,
I
it
think
was.
about it. But yeah, no, I thought it was cool. I mean, it's definitely sided more towards the horror side of the fence than it did the comedy aspects.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So it's more of a
because the
straight-up
reason
horror
why I
movie.
watch Evil Dead is to laugh. To be honest,
Yeah.
I don't watch it in a scary sense, even though it is scary. But I watch it to laugh. Whether it's like the remake was not for laughs at all.
It was really scary though.
It was. Gregory has another comment. He just says, "What do you think of jump scares and why they're so popular in certain horror films?"
Because they're easy to do. That's why.
What are some of your favorite zombie films? Modern zombie films. This is a fun one for me. 28 Days Later.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
28 Days Later is one that I actually like Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead
That's good.
quite a
That's a
bit.
good one.
You know that one?
Yeah.
Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is one. I'm probably the only person left on this planet still watching The Walking Dead. Shout out to The Walking Dead.
Oh no.
I love The Walking Dead, man, and I've had debates about people a lot, but I get it. It's for me, it's like you know what you're getting in for, so I'm in it. But yeah, mainly 28 Days Later and probably Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead or some modern ones that unless you can remind me of some other ones.
Well, I know a lot of people will talk about that new one, Train to Busan.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen it to be honest.
Yeah, I've only seen like some of it on Amazon, but I heard that one was really good. And there's, I mean, 28 Days Later obviously is a great one. And I think the zombie film has kind of switched to some extent. I mean, we see like some more movies like Contagion kind of being almost like a zombie movie in a way, like, or at least the setup was. Which isn't a horror movie. It's just a straight up drama, but in a way, like that's kind of the Soderbergh way of doing like almost like a zombie movie kind of.
Sure.
Because people are just falling in the streets, like all that kind of stuff. Shaun of the Dead, we talked about, I think that I mean, we kind of talked about World War Z a little bit. I like the ending of World War Z a lot, actually. Like the whole part that they had to like reshoot apparently with the with Brad Pitt being stuck in the building,
Sure.
and kind of have to be silent as like the zombie like passes through. I enjoy that a lot. As an overall movie is not great, but like that whole like last sequence was like genuine good zombie movie.
Jen Kemp says, "What's your most hated horror movie cliche?"
Black Guy Dies.
You know what's so funny? As soon as you said that, I was thinking it.
Yeah.
I was like, Black Guy Dies first. My most hated horror movie cliche. I don't know. Maybe jump scares for the heck of it was one of mine. Yeah.
There are some jump scares that could be done really, really well.
Really,
though.
really well.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. I know a movie that a lot of people love, The Descent, does some really good jump scares really well.
Yeah, I love that movie. Yeah.
Sam Anderson mentions the importance of George Romero.
Yeah,
he's
absolutely. Yeah, we touched on it a little bit.
He's another one that's very important.
A lot of people are putting The Conjuring. I'm seeing like Conjuring is something that really resonated with a lot of people.
Again, demons.
No, I think that's kind of one of the first examples. I mean, horror's kind of going through like a dry spell for a long time, you know, with when it comes to like the found footage movies kind of overcrowding. A lot of the Saw movies kept coming every year, so it's kind of starting to get washed down. But like, luckily, The Conjuring came in and kind of like buoyed a lot of the genre up.
It really did. That's
Yeah.
such a good point. It really it gave new seriousness, I guess is the word, to
Mm-hmm.
the genre. Whether it's like you can take this in a serious way and not in a haha, look at how that girl got her head exploded kind
Yeah,
of
you
way.
could put some real money into it. Get,
Yeah.
like, real actors and real. I mean, it's just James Wan too is like the modern horror master. You know,
Really is.
we don't give him enough credit, but he pretty much single handedly created like three of like the greatest horror franchises of like the modern era. You know, with Saw, with and of course with The Conjuring, and with Insidious, which is still something that I think Insidious 1 and Insidious 2 are both really strong.
Really
films.
scary.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Jedi DMF says, "What are some Halloween movies that you watch every year? Mine is Hocus Pocus and The Addams Family and Beetlejuice. Shout out
Beetlejuice.
to Hocus Pocus. Shout out to that movie. I remember watching that movie as a kid all the freaking time.
Yeah.
I remember being creeped out. I remember having fun. That movie is great. I love that movie. Another one for me, for all you Disney Channel original fans out there, Halloween Town and Halloween Town 2.
Let's go.
Hey, that's my movie right there, bro. That was my shit when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I remember watching Halloween Town all the time, and it's like the 1, the 2, even the third one too, I would see.
Yeah.
But it's mainly 1 and 2 that I remember quite a bit. But Halloween Town and Halloween Town 2 are like
Halloween
my horror kind of every year Halloween kind of movies. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have any that you
Well,
love?
starting like I think in my senior year of high school, I started watching Rocky Horror Picture Show every Halloween, and that just kind of become like a tradition of mine. So, like,
Yeah.
it's a really good, like really funny horror movie.
Yeah.
Not it's not really horror. It's just a good Halloween movie. Like
Um,
horror musical. Not a genre explored a lot.
that's another. Oh, shout out to Buffy.
Buffy,
Buffy the
yeah.
Vampire Slayer, who did that in a very very excellent way. You're right, Sweeney Todd.
Yes, Sweeney Todd
For any of you guys who want to look this up, the cast of Hamilton did a Sweeney Todd remix to Alexander Hamilton, the song
Oh,
Hamilton.
really?
Have you not seen
No,
that?
I haven't seen
Oh
that.
my god, it's so good. I loved it. Like I literally memorized the song because I rewatched it over and over again. But basically, it's the same thing as the Alexander Hamilton song, but they do Sweeney Todd.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
So good,
funny.
so good. Nightwolf says most overrated or underrated horror film for you.
Overrated. I mean, like I don't really know what to call overrated. I guess, and in a sense of like horror.
But
you
there's
know
so
what?
many horror classics that people are like, it's amazing, and you watch it and you're like,
You know what? Yeah, I will give it. You know, and I think Beardo kind of tweeted this the other day. Like the original
Oh.
Friday the 13th.
oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of schlocky. Like it's really like it didn't age well, you know,
Sure.
in relation to like all the other ones. So to me, that probably have to take the cake as like overrated wise. Underrated. I don't know. I mean, I still go back to. I mean, I guess. The Descent has like a lot of attention. So I wouldn't really consider that underrated.
Not anymore.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think, Ace?
What We Do in the Shadows.
In the Shadows? Yeah.
More people
Horror
should see
comedy.
that
Yeah,
movie.
there you go.
Before we finish up, I just kind of want to talk about our favorites of the year so far, 2017. Obviously,
There's been a lot of good ones.
There's been a lot of good ones. Obviously, my favorite will still probably and will always be Get Out, at least for the year, just because I enjoyed that movie and we talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah.
I am one of the people who really, really liked it a lot. I know it got a little bit of weird like backlash. Not necessarily backlash, but just anything that gets so popular, people start to say, "Oh, it wasn't even that great" or stuff like that. But I enjoyed the crap out of it. I think it gave us amazing performances. I thought the kids were great. I thought Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise was awesome. I just really enjoyed that movie quite a bit. Any of the year that you liked?
No, definitely Get Out. Definitely It. You know, It is a good example of like genre blending. You know, it's the horror, but it's one of the only first and few times that we see the horror really mixed in really well with the coming of age story. So that's what really compelled me. I think a lot of the backlash came from people saying it really wasn't that scary. To me, that wasn't the point. To me, the whole point was like the story of those kids
Sure.
and whatnot. So for me, Get Out, that French film Raw that came out
still haven't
was
seen
really
it.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's pretty horror. It's kind of like in the same categorization, I suppose, like the Neon Demon
Sure.
kind of deal, except a lot bloodier and a lot more graphic. So those three, and I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen It Comes at Night, but a lot
I
of
haven't seen it
people
either.
talk about
Dang.
that. Yeah.
The ones that obviously I already mentioned mine, but I also want to give a shout out, and I know they're not horror movies, but I'm still gonna give them a shout out. A Ghost Story is a phenomenal movie. It's not horror, but I'm still gonna mention it just because I love it so much. It's a weird art house movie that most people will not like. But
Mother,
it's absolutely.
Do you consider Mother a horror movie?
I don't,
Yeah.
but sure.
You don't even consider Mother like a movie. Like,
No,
right?
I kind of don't. No, it's great, but it's more of like a poem. I already said that before.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mother is an interesting one for sure. But no, for me, A Ghost Story is just a fascinating film that a lot of people should see. Also, Personal Shopper has some horror.
Oh yeah,
elements in
yeah,
it.
that's true.
I know I
yeah.
mentioned that movie. Another weird movie that I loved.
didn't think about
Yeah, those are. It's a good year. I know there's plenty.
Like Annabelle Creation did really well.
Annabelle Creation.
There's, I mean, 2017, and even with horror TV starting to come back more to the rise.
Absolutely.
I think horror TV is what helped Bowie up this new age of like
Yeah.
great horror. Because before with movies, we weren't really having like the big hits that we were having, but started seeing shows like Walking Dead pop up when it first popped up, American Horror Story, doing really well.
Have you seen this season yet?
I
I
haven't
remember.
started this season. No.
Dang it,
And
dude, remember
you know
I-
I'm like the biggest American Horror Story fan.
Yeah,
though, so
yeah.
I
I
haven't
shout
started.
out to Sarah Paulson, who I know is watching.
Hey,
I love you, Sarah Paulson. That's my girl. Yeah, I know. I literally I'm currently watching it right now, and I know you're gonna start watching it by the time this is up. But Stranger Things, I know it's not really horror, but it kind of is horror. It has horror elements to it.
Yeah.
But that's another show that has some creepy elements that is also has some things that deal in the horror genre.
Yeah.
Do you have any other? Oh, Life! Shout out to Life. I really liked Life. I know a lot of people didn't like it and called it an alien ripoff, but if you haven't seen Life, I would give it a shot. It's definitely an interesting style based on the alien genre because it basically is alien, but I still liked it quite a bit. It's just really freaking well done.
Right.
If you haven't seen Life, it stars Jake Gyllenhaal and Ryan Reynolds, and that's a really fun movie. But yeah, those are.
Deep Water 3.
What is that?
That's the film that I did the shark diving for. Guys, check out that video.
I remember that. You didn't even do it though.
Yeah, we didn't
The
even.
fake
I
shark
didn't- I
diving
didn't even-
video.
it's just- yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's been especially with TV, with horror and with horror movies, it becoming like the biggest hit
Sure.
like, of the year, one of the biggest hits of the year, one of the biggest horror films of all time. It's just showing that there's a new appetite.
And the fact that appetite for new horror movies, and the fact that and quality horror movies like an It and like a Get Out, and the fact that we're probably gonna get. At least I'm predicting. I know obviously a lot of people might disagree with me, but a Get Out nomination for original screenplay, I think is bound to happen, and even a Get Out nomination for Best Picture might even happen.
I think it's locked in.
I almost think it's locked in too
Yeah,
because last time on the Schmoes podcast, I thought it was. I said it was a lock, and I almost can say it's a lock, but that's amazing, right? Because we haven't had that kind of horror movie that makes it in the Oscar conversation in quite a long time.
Yeah.
So it gives the opportunity for more quality horror films and for people to take it on a serious award-winning level, which is
Yeah.
great. I mean, that's awesome.
And let's call it spade a spade, all right? Every year the Oscars nominate at least like one black movie, and they have to slip get out in because I don't really see what else is coming out this year.
Hey, there's
maybe Girls Trip, maybe Girls Trip.
I
but-
doubt Girls Trip.
Yeah, but I think
maybe.
Get Out. And plus, it's transcended horror so much now that
It really
it's
did.
become such a big part of popular culture.
Yeah,
and started such a conversation. Even if it's not the greatest movie of the year, it's definitely a lot. It's definitely a crowd pleaser, and it definitely
There's also-
started a conversation.
And there's also like the thought of like I see it more as a thriller, to be honest, Get Out, but it is in the horror movie genre, which I guess it's fair. But it also reminds me of stuff like if you guys haven't seen The Guest, I love The Guest so much, and it kind of falls. Have you seen The Guest?
Yeah.
and it kind of falls into that horror genre or like thriller type genre, or in movies like that, obviously. But I want to give a last shout out to a movie that is such a split movie. Like half the people hated it, half the people really liked it.
Split.
Besides Split, Alien Covenant. Alien Covenant to me, I already mentioned it before, but I liked it quite a bit. I thought it could have been done way better. I agree. I wish they would have leaned more towards the Prometheus aspect than the alien aspect. I felt like the alien thing was kind of just forced in there, but I felt like Ridley Scott really wants to explore more philosophical, existential questions inside this horror, and making it through symbolism and through metaphors of Christianity and of creation and of death and of evil, of a satanic evil character which is what we got in that movie, and with the idea of like humanity kind of destroying itself. I don't know. I just thought it deals with questions that are very interesting, and I wish they would have let him deal with those questions a little bit more. But that's one movie that a lot of people forget even happened because it freaking bombed at the box office. It made no money.
It came and went.
Yeah.
I mean,
any last horror movie you want to mention before we call it a
no, I mean,
show?
For in terms of 2017.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's been a lot of interesting ones, man. I mean, I haven't seen Happy Death Day yet. I'm actually really excited for that because I hear that's also like another like comedy horror influx, and you know, I just kind of, I mean, I kind of want to give a shout out to another TV show which isn't exactly horror, but you could tell it has a lot of the horror influences. Is Legion that came out earlier this year with you know, the X-Men. To me, that's kind of almost the first.
Who's also in The Guest, by the way.
Dan Stevens. Also in Beauty and the Beast.
Yep.
He's had a good year. But yeah, it's funny with you know, with Legion. To me, that's kind of almost the first kind of clear-cut example of how a horror superhero movie would look like, and you know, it was so well done, so brilliant. I mean, Noah Hawley, is that his name?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. He is a genius, man. He is a genius with that and Fargo, and he's doing the Doctor Doom movie now, which I'm excited for.
That's really cool.
And even now the new X-Men film that they just put out the trailer for.
Yeah. The freaking, what is it called? Oh no.
New Mutants.
New Mutants.
Yeah, that's straight up.
It's
horror.
straight up horror.
Yeah.
And it's small horror too. It doesn't look big. It doesn't look like a huge X-Men movie.
Yeah, it's like a containment kind of thriller. And you know, when you look at the director of that, Josh Boone, he's done like a lot of like romantic stuff, like romantic comedies. Yeah, exactly. And he did one before that I really enjoyed, like his first film. He had with like Greg Kinnear, I can't remember the name of it off the top, but it's also like romantic. But a lot of his movies also contain a lot of like Stephen King references in them, and which I think that's definitely why he is so inspired to do a horror kind of superhero movie, because he wants to get like that Stephen King feel to it.
Sure.
And I think that trailer just looks fantastic.
Yeah,
man. Like,
excited. New things coming for horror. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching, guys. Make sure you guys leave a comment. Let us know what you guys think. Share it, like it, do all that jazz, because we are going to be reading those comments on next week's episode, and we're going to figure out next week's episode eventually. But all right, guys, for the Meaning of Podcast, I'm Ace. This is RB3, and we are peacing out.